Welcome back, Inebri-art. I feel like it's been a little while since we've had a musician on, which is weird because we do a lot of musicians because they're hardworking and they're always doing press. But today we're joined by Laura Pieri. Did I get that right?
Yes, yeah.
All right, sweet. Don't worry, our listeners know I'm terrible at names, but I try my best. Uh, so I was telling you right before that I don't normally plan questions, and I usually try to have like one. Um, and so you put out a short film, and this is what kind of caught my attention from your PR to go hand in hand with your EP, Frankie. And it took me longer to connect that it's called Frankie. It starts with a quote from Mary Shelley. There's some horror imagery in there, let's say. I mean, are you a horror fan? Like, where did all that come from?
I'm a huge horror fan. I
Okay.
I love the genre itself, and I love like what's come out of horror recently. Like I'm really excited to go see Longlegs. I think we're having a fantastic horror movie summer.
Okay.
There's a lot of great stuff that I think has come out over recent years. And I love reading horror. And like for the longest time, The Exorcist was my comfort movie.
Mm-hmm.
uh, which is an odd choice to have as like
Sure.
some people turn on Disney as their comfort shows. For me, it was The Exorcist for the longest time. And I remember reading Mary Shelley in school and being like, this is something else. Because it was, first of all, she's 19,
Mm-hmm.
creating the genre of sci fi and horror at once, like in one fell swoop. And then you look more into her story and like her mom being a writer, and then the themes of just being a woman in a man's world, which to me reads so clearly through her work, and just the pressure of all of being alive when she was. And then just that little seed led to amazing work, and we would have had probably like Hereditary if we didn't have Mary Shelley. So
Yeah.
I do love the genre, and as much as like the books of horror,
Mm-hmm.
like I still Goosebumps as a kid.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
I still love that, and I love horror games as well. I'm not that good at games.
Like
Like I
video
love
games or tabletop?
video games, like
Okay.
Until Dawn. I love, adore, all of those in that whole genre. I really like. I'm really bad at them, but I really
Yeah.
like them.
Yeah, but they just have to be, it's not about being good. It's about having fun, right? That's kind of
Exactly.
the point. Yeah.
Exactly.
My kid is big into Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh yeah,
That's like,
I like the game. I just saw the show too. Really good.
yeah, I put it on and I don't remember why. I've been so busy that I think I've started like four movies and gotten about 20 minutes in and then either fallen asleep or been like, I need to go to bed. Like in my queue is Godzilla minus one. I still haven't seen. Um, it not that that's horror, but it's kind of like horror adjacent.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah.
No, my favorite horror movie isn't even a horror movie. Like my all-time favorite movie ever is The Cabin.
That's an wait. Am I thinking the right one? Is that the one with Helmsworth and like all the
Yep.
creatures? Okay, so I'm thinking the right one. That's an amazing horror film. Like, what do you? That is definitely a horror. That to me, that that kind of horror movie is my favorite. Like Shaun of the Dead. I think that humor belongs in almost every genre. And I remember us talking with someone about the Game of Thrones mini series, House of Dragons, I think is what it's called. And I'm like, it's not that good. And they're like, yeah, it's not funny. And I'm like, Game of Thrones isn't funny. And they're like, Game of Thrones is hysterical. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's
Friends is
really funny. And it's like, I think it helps add to the tension when you have it offset by comedy
yeah.
and like good things.
I wholly agree. I think it's funny because I love that type of like horror comedy so much. Like the scary movies, as much as they're like so satire, they're really funny.
Yeah.
At the same time, I love this kind of more experimental horror that I think we're getting a lot recently. Like I loved Midsommar. I loved Hereditary. I think that those were incredible, incredible movies. Um, Even like Poor Things, which I mean,
Oh,
all the Yorgo
that's that's another one I started watch. That's the one with
Emma Stone.
Emma Stone. Thank you. And
Yes.
I got like 45 minutes into and fell asleep. And it wasn't because I was like bored. I was just exhausted.
I
And
mean, it's not a horror movie, but I think that it's got elements of a new kind of
it's very
way.
Frankenstein. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm witnessing, I think, creators, especially movie creators, get a little more out there with horror first. And I
Yeah.
always think that like horror is probably one of the most experimental genres around there. Like you can only reinvent the romantic comedy formula so many times,
Mm-hmm.
but there's endlessly things to be afraid of. So horror can come from anywhere, and I love that. It's like I have anxiety. I think as most people my age actually, we just generally it comes from the factory. We come with anxiety,
Yeah.
and it's I tell people that like watching horror movies, it's like microdosing anxiety, but like for free, for fun. And
Okay.
there's so many different ways that you can do that. I remember when Paranormal Activity first came out, and then we had I mean, obviously the Blair Witch Project did it first, but we suddenly had like an onslaught of these found footage kind of styles of movies.
Yep.
And now I think we're starting to see kind of like uncomfortable horror and an uncomfortableness to the theme of it all that I love, that I'm really enjoying, that I'm like watching, and hopefully in future projects I'll get to be creative like that and do something like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I know what you mean. Like, one of my favorites lately has been and I don't know, you may not call it horror, but I think if you're not calling it horror, you're not really watching, is Black Mirror.
Oh, it's absolutely horror.
Oh God. And it's so close to like real life. And that to me, that is like I can watch an episode at a time and like a few afterwards, I'm like, I think I need a hug, that it is really and I always tell people, I'm like, skip the first episode. The first episode is like mediocre. But
I actually disagree.
you
I actually
disagree? Okay.
I really like the first episode, and I think that it has an important. There's a reason it's the first episode. I
Okay.
think it sets the tone for what is to come, and it's not like it's the one that's not really about technology. It's not really about like the future in that
Yeah.
sense, but it says so much about us, about people, and especially like that last ending, not the ending, but like the last few where you see that like the pig was released
Yeah.
before it was aired.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever, like we see that like technically people didn't need to be watching, but everybody watched.
Right.
It has it to me is like the mission statement of Black Mirror that then gets expanded upon by like all the other episodes.
Okay.
So
All
I
right. I can.
personally really like the first episode,
Yeah.
but I only like it as the first episode. I think if it was a second, I wouldn't have liked it. I like it as the opener. I think
That's
that it does a great job.
that's interesting because I feel like, and I recommend it to everybody, and I'm just like, maybe it's just because I feel like people who aren't into dark things might be like, this is really off-putting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
I think
maybe,
people would be
maybe I
more
should
like
just warn them, just be like, get through the first episode. And yeah, but I mean, there's so many great
the
things about that
hardest
series.
one, but it's the hardest one to stomach almost. Like out of all of them, I think the first I find myself getting so much more squeamish,
Yeah.
partially because the plot is so absurd, but also it's so simple. It's like now what?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, I suppose you're, yeah. And there were just so many, and I find it had cliffhangers in great ways. And I mean, I audibly yelled at my TV at some points, like out sitting at home, just like by myself in disbelief at how it's just masterful. It's just so good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think like with the incoming of like streaming services, we get horror series that I think are fantastic. I'm a big, big fan of Mike Flanagan. I don't know, I'm totally mispronouncing his last name.
I'm not sure who
He
that
did The
is.
Haunting of Hill House.
Okay.
He did Bly Manor. And recently, oh my God, there was one about a family. I forget the name. And there's also one about an island and a priest.
I'm a priest.
Oh my God, of course the name escapes me. Of course. And I'm a huge fan of all of
Yeah,
his work. I'm pretty sure that I just named almost everything he's worked on the last, like, well, I didn't actually name it, but I think I just
yeah.
perused
Mentioned.
around. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And the thing that I like most about horror, which is the thing I like about music the most, is like, for example, rhythm is universal. You can
Hmm.
have a good melody and the world will resonate with that. But lyrics and being masterful with your words speaks to people in different ways every time. Like
Yeah,
a poem differently, the way it hits different people, but and you can play things like you can play the same melody in multiple different ways. So you can do that with melody as well. But I'm a words girly.
hmm,
So working with lyrics is, to me, kind of the way I approach it is very much the things I like about horror scripts. I think that different the things that make us afraid are so much more about like the unknown. It's so hard. Like monsters we create in our mind, but we are really afraid of that of which we don't really know.
right.
And you connect that to like things in history that have made us afraid, and even religion, and how like religion runs around ideas of like we're only afraid of hell because it's scary. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like it's
hmm,
there because there's a level of fear.
yeah,
And horror, you have to have a good script. You have to have, it has to tie to something real for that fear to be authentic. And I think that that's so hard to do. And there's in the show about the priest, which I really wish I remember the name right now. There is this like monologue that the one of the female characters goes on, and I like got insane goosebumps. And it's this horror show about a vampire who is also like feeding on a priest, and it's so hard to explain, and it's a small town.
yeah,
And but there's this one monologue that happens towards the end of the series that's so human, and it's so well crafted and so well done, and the delivery, I think that the actress is named Kate who does it. The delivery is just so fantastic that like it's horror is the one genre that I find myself having to pause and be like, God damn, that was poetic. That was beautiful.
and the thing that I love about horror is it is the most forgiving audience where we
Absolutely.
have spent so much of our lives watching horror movies made on shoestring budgets that it's just you're there's a certain amount of like that's expected. I'm not going to overly criticize its continuity or the special effects because like when you sit down and watch it in your brain you're like I know this is low budget, so you cut it a lot, and no other craft do we do that,
Absolutely.
so I love that the fans are like I'm here for good story and entertain me, that's
Absolutely.
so
Midnight Mass is the name.
Midnight
It's
Mass.
Midnight Mass.
I knew you would get it. Yeah, so I didn't really expect to have you like I'm like, oh, she must be a horror fan. I didn't expect you to be that big of a horror fan. But it's awesome. Like I myself, I tend to lean more towards like bad horror movies and like bad sci-fi movies, the ones that are done. They I was because anytime I talk about that, people are like, oh, like Sharknado. I'm like, no, because Sharknado was intentionally done badly. I want someone trying their hardest and missing the mark.
Like Birdemic.
Birdemic's a great one. Basically anything that would end up on Mystery Science Theater 3000. So I just love that kind of campy feel, and there's still some good stories, but it's like again, you can have a laugh at it at the same time. Yeah.
I bad movies is like a hobby of mine. I put in I clock in and I clock out to watch bad movies. I have a passion for it.
Hmm.
And the more serious they are, because there's in my brain, there are three categories of bad movies.
Okay.
There are movies that take themselves seriously and then happen to be bad.
Yes.
There are movies that know they're bad and they lean into being bad.
Yeah.
And then I call this the okay, hear me out genre, because they were sitting in a pitch room and somebody said, okay, hear me out. What if insert absurd premise?
Yeah.
Like, what if a couch was a killer and now you got couch killer? Like,
Like Ginger Dead Man.
or like, what was it? Abraham Lincoln killing the lesbian vampires?
Oh, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. That one?
Like, so that's an okay, hear me out concept.
Yeah, I didn't think that was a great. I heard the book is a lot better. I didn't really love the movie. I felt it was like,
What? Abraham Lincoln killing
yeah.
lesbian vampires is a bad movie? Who could have foreseen that?
But it wasn't even bad in a good way. Like, I don't know. I don't know. There was just, I felt it was too heavy on the CGI. I don't remember lesbian
Mm.
vampires. I remember him throwing a horse at someone, and I was just like, ugh, come on.
It might not have been lesbian vampires, but I know there's a
Yeah,
movie about some historical figure hunting some lesbian vampires.
there must be. Yeah.
There definitely is. And the thing that I think, like, I make a joke about this, like, with my friends all the time, because people are like, oh, what's up? And I was like, oh, the horrors of being a woman. Because it's a joke, but it's also not. I think that it's very unique in the sense of you can be keenly aware that like the world wasn't really built for you, but
Hmm.
also it was built to define you too. And for the longest time, our role was like property, and also like because we hold the ability to breed, that was also a keen value that you could bring to what you were offering the world. Um,
I
and
mean, at some point in times, it was your only job was
yeah, exactly.
to get give quote unquote. There's a strong air quotes. Don't cancel me, people. But
Yeah.
your job is to give me an heir. Like that was the
Oh my
mentality.
God. We're watching House of the Dragon. We just discussed this. That's at the heart of that entire show.
Yeah.
And when we look at history, I do think that like when you talk about like horror, we say that today, like, oh my God, she's such a witch. We rarely say like, oh my God, he's such a warlock. That's not the kind of, we don't throw that around the way we throw that to around women.
Hmm.
And women were literally burned alive for saying that. We could have like for existing, you
Yeah.
know?
There's
And
so much of our words that we use that are feminine in some way or another that we use in a derogatory way, like hysteric.
yes,
She's just,
absolutely.
they're hysterical. It
Yeah.
was not a positive thing. It was meant you're crazy, and it was something like they believed your ovaries were moving around your body, making you crazy. That was the original term for hysterical, and it's like
Yeah.
it's it is, and I mean this is a theme from your EP Frankie is kind of being stuck in an industry that I mean, find an industry that isn't set up and leans towards men. Like I'm a straight white guy, so I have a lot of time being like, I feel just a lot of guilt, and but it's. I had this conversation with a friend of mine. We went to dinner the other night, and so my youngest is non-binary, and my friend knows my youngest, and they're like, oh, they're so great, and blah blah blah. And then kind of there's always, and they didn't mean it in a bad way, but they're like, do you think any of this is a fad of younger people? And I'm like, maybe, who cares? Like, let them have let to me it's more about figuring out who you are and having the freedom to do so. Like
Yeah.
it might be a fad for you, and like later on you're like, no, you know what, I decided I'm not non-binary anymore. Cool, then you're not anymore. It's we're so stuck in this rigid, it's this way or that way. And I like how maybe not as fast as I would like, but it's coming more amorphous, and like, who cares? Did you get
But I keep seeing it go in front of my face.
it? No, for our listeners, you just try to grab a fly. I thought you had it. But no, like it's
But
more
I
of like
have to.
more like this aim. Like I really want it to be like this amorphous. Like I don't care who you're into. It's none of my business. I don't care who you are. Can you do the job? I
Yeah.
just there's so much baggage that goes with that stuff, and
Because at the
I
end
don't
of the day, like talking about like the self, as in like the capital
mhm.
SELF, self, and the identity of the self. And that's something that it's really easy to be scared of what is not you. And it's really easy to also not comprehend that which is not you.
Mhm.
Uh, and so when we're talking about like I like horror a lot because listen, like being a woman is not exactly like a peaceful existence. Like our bodies, we put our bodies through absolute global warming just because
Yeah.
to keep up with beauty standards that are insane. That it's not the same for men. There
No.
are beauty standards for men who are oppressive in other ways, but I think that this conversation it extends itself to like race, to being able-bodied, to queerness, and it has its own place in all of those sectors, right?
Yeah.
I think that like and the thing that I most connect to about why I connect so much to horror as an idea too is because like the worst things that we have all done is the things that we have done to each other. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I don't
That's
know
okay.
why. I like muted the thing and then of course it starts beeping.
Yeah.
The worst things that we have always done have been the things that we have done to each other.
Oh yeah. I listened to a podcast called Monster Talk, and it's about like cryptids and whatever. And he always asks people at the end, his go-to question is, "What's your favorite monster?" And I've always thought, like, how would I answer that? I'm like, oh, humans. Humans are the worst.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Like,
That's
of
okay.
course, the moment that like I'm busy and I tell everyone not to talk to me, like my mom starts trying to call me and I'm like, mother, no, no.
Parents.
Why? Like, why? I just want to tell you I love you. Thank you.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Oh my God. No, it's that's my parents don't live here in the US. So like for them, every like they don't know what my day is like. So whenever they're like, must speak to you, they have this like idea of what it means that I do. And I think that they imagine me being in this room, like carefully like crafting like a song out of scratch. And I'm like, you know that they make guitars. Like I don't make I don't get a block of wood to make that. Or I think that she just imagines that I like sit here contemplating, like, what will I write? But no, I love my parents very much. I think that's really sweet. I'm
Yeah.
sorry that she with
No,
us, but
no, that I think that's really sweet. And in from their standpoint, I will frequently just be thinking of my kid, whichever one, and I'll just be like, "Meh," and I just text him out of the blue, and it'll, either I text him a lot of dad jokes because I'm dad, but sometimes it's just, like, "Hey, I love you," and I remember I texted my youngest Zoe, and I texted them. I said, "Hey, turd, I love you." And they're like, wow, real nice. And I'm like, I bet you if I text your brother, I get I love you back. And so I texted my son and I said, hey, buddy, I love you. And right back, he's like, I love you too. So I screen captured it and sent it to Zoe. And I'm like, see? And they're like, yeah, but why am I turd and he's buddy? And I'm like, because turd's non binary. And they're just like, oh, damn it.
that's kind of funny. No,
Yeah.
my that's really so I prefer identify as queer and I prefer the term queer over like bisexual or anything else.
Yeah.
Um, and I come from Catholic Christian country. Brazil is very
Yeah.
along those lines. So coming out to my family is really funny. My mom still doesn't quite grasp it. So, and then she'd be like, and my gay daughter. And I'm like, yes, but also no. Also
Yeah.
yes, but also no.
Yeah.
Um, and my dad does his best with like I mean you give it to them. They're very for the world that they grew up in, they're doing amazing. But my dad's like, ah, yes, so and so also has a child of the same group of you.
Do you know them? Do you know them?
Yeah, and or it's
uh,
like you both would get along, and I'm like, yes, absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. No, no. So I think that that's really funny.
that's cute.
On, I think it's funny that you mentioned, um, not like funny that you mentioned, but so Frankie was also the name of my snake that I had while I used to live out in LA.
Okay.
And for the longest time, they were named Frankie because no one could figure out if my snake was male or female. So we just collectively decided that I had a non-binary snake. So we needed a gender neutral name.
Yep.
So we went with Frankie. So for the longest time, I eventually found out that my snake was a male, but it took a long time to get
Yeah.
there. So for like the first year, they were just a non-binary snake that named
Yeah.
Frankie.
I
And a
have I
while
have
later,
I have a terrarium just off camera over there that I built about a month and a half ago, and I used like some branches from the yard to decorate it, whatever. And then so now there's a snail in it.
oh
Yeah.
my God.
So
Careful, because if a snail breeds, you're gonna have a lot of snails.
that's so my youngest Zoe said the same thing. They're like, "Oh, you have to crush their eggs." I'm like, "That just seems mean." They're like, "No, it's the humane thing to do." I'm like, "Is it? Can I put them outside?" Um,
Or
but
else they eat it, right? Something like that.
yeah, something, yeah. But it's Terry, the terrarium snail.
Terry the terrarium
Yeah,
snail. I love
you can
that.
follow him on Insta at Terry Terrarium Snail. And yeah, Zoe's like, "Oh, you know they're hermaphroditic," and I'm like, and then I said something, and they're like, "Oh, he." I'm like, "Oh, way to misgender Terry," and yeah, so it's I don't know, he's my new buddy. So
I love that.
yeah,
I'm really into plants. I didn't come up with this, but
okay.
I was did a Hoya for my birthday,
You did what?
and a Hoya, that's like a type of a plant.
Okay.
And I was suggested the name La Jolla Jackson. So
Oh, that's pretty good. I love good puns. We do.
puns is something I'm still getting around to, maybe because
Okay.
English is my second language. I like kind of like them, but I don't quite get them. I like that's what she said. I like that. I like that one a
That's
lot.
I do that a ton. But I feel like puns are very like dad joke adjacent.
Okay.
Um, so like we run dog events and someone brought their dog named Bilbo Wagons, and I was just like, that's the best dog name I've ever heard in my life.
I really like dog names with like it's the most like absurd looking dog, and it's just like Steve. It just has like a
You know,
person.
everyone does that now, and I'm not in for that.
I agree with that.
So
It was funnier when it was rare, and it would just
yeah,
be like, yeah.
my
Or
new
like
thing
maybe
is
they're opposites, like a dog named Cat. I like those too.
that's cool. I'm down with that. Um, I am I want to get a English bulldog and I want to name it Dump Truck because I'm like that is just the perfect name for an English bulldog.
I had a bulldog growing up. Their name
Yeah.
was Cheesecake.
I'll see foods make great dog names. Like Bean Dip, I think is a great dog name.
Bean Dip is a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
because he
like.
can be like, "Ooh, good beanie boy," that kind of stuff. Because you never call them just by their name.
See, like that is Leo
Yeah,
there, but like his unofficial name is Leonard, and it's just I just think it matches his vibe a lot more.
yeah,
A lot of things, but Leonard is like when he's being bad. I just think that like he needed a government name. I needed
yep,
like I could like Leo. I needed a government to refer to. So Leonard is his name, but my other cat is Aquila, but her government is Shakira. So
okay. That's a bit of a different one. So nice. So I suppose we should talk about your EP.
I know I will get around to it eventually.
No. But so do you, it the I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what I read, the premise is a woman trying to make it in like a male dominated industry. Do you feel do you feel that it is getting better? Do you feel it's stayed the same? Um, like,
That's a tough one to
yeah,
answer because I think that there are aspects of it that are better, and I think that there are aspects of it that are worse. And it's the project kind of it was my own meditation when I was leaving the industry. It was kind of like this isn't it for me. I'm not gonna be doing this anymore. So I get to say what I want and say how I felt.
but you're not
And
doing music anymore.
I thought I wasn't. When I
Oh,
started
okay,
working on the
okay,
project, it was like I'm done. I went back to school. I started getting my MBA. I was like, I'm gonna be in corporate America. I'm not gonna do this artist thing is not it for me. It's for somebody else, maybe not for me. Um, because I had just lost so much passion for it when I was out in LA, and I'd lost so much of the joy of being an artist. I wasn't making to make, I was making because it was like, make something that sells. How can we market you? How can we? And it just didn't get to a point. I was miserable, quite frankly. Not by any other reason other than like the fact that I felt like so little of it was me still,
Mm-hmm.
and so much of it was an attempt at brand, an attempt at like commercialability and things like that. And I have had pretty terrible experiences, but I know friends who have had far worse. And every single woman that I know that's in this industry has countless horror stories that they can just whip out.
Yeah.
It's very like even the way we talk about Beyonce's body or Taylor Swift's body is very different. We don't talk about Justin Timberlake like that. We
Mm-hmm.
don't talk about Justin Bieber like that. It's not. We don't have the same standards. We don't even have the same customs, and it's just um, like it will chew you up and spit you out in such a way that when I thought I was leaving, like this was about 2 years ago, I was like, I'm done. I'm going back to New York. I was able to sit with like when you're just like, when you're doing stuff and you're going forward, you don't stop to think about the effect it's had on you. And then when I was like, I'm done, and I sat with my feelings, it just started coming up like this project. It just felt like I already had like the concept roughly. And for me, Frankie's a character. She's outside of me. So it's like, it's got parts of my story, but it itself is not my story,
Mm-hmm.
but it's got so much of my story in there, and so much of story of women that I know and I worked with and friends of mine, and even women not even in music. It's just it's kind of a Frankenstein of experiences.
Yeah.
And um it I at first was like, I need to talk about this because I just think that the story is calling me, and it's got like nothing to do with me, but so much of I think could be helpful. And then the more I worked through it, and like even now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, this had everything to do with me. It was very much how I like digested that experience, especially because I just like recently started calling the shots in my own career. For the longest time, the people in charge were men, and they were older men, and they had a lot of opinions. And the amount of times that I was told, like, you need to be like the woman that all women want to be and the woman that all men want to fuck. Like I've been told that.
Yeah.
That's incredibly inappropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I've had meetings where like my body is being discussed, and I'm in there. I'm in the room, and it's being talked about in a way it's like that's incredibly inappropriate. And it's just I don't think that it I don't think that, and I think entertainment as a whole treats women pretty terribly. And very rarely do you see women in positions of power. And like if you look at like how many female CEOs in entertainment can you name? And it's
Oh,
like, yep,
no
that's
idea.
my point.
Yeah.
And even like of the, let's say like if you could name a few, how many of them are women of color?
Yeah.
That's even smaller pool.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have people at the top who look like you or who are like you, your perspective is not in the room when the decisions are being made. That's just what it is, because that's how you get your perspective in the room. The reason
Mm-hmm.
that like we're able to say like, well, the world was made for rich white guys is because it's rich white guys who talk to other rich white guys about how they want their world to go.
Yep.
And it's very rarely anything else.
And then they become the gatekeepers, either through just vast money or political power,
Yes.
that they keep it that way.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I'm sorry. At least I'm not rich.
I mean, it's not your fault. Like
I know, but it's just sometimes it just breaks my heart because it's just like, and it is all. I'm gonna circle it right back to the horror movie. It's all that they're afraid of what they don't know,
exactly. Yes.
and it's they're afraid that if they let someone into the club, sorry, there's some construction going on outside. They go right by my window. Sometimes it gets really loud.
It's fine. I can barely hear.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so they I think they're afraid to, if they let in people who aren't them into the club, then there's going to be no place for them,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. I mean, the scariest thing for the longest time was like a woman who could talk and free speech, or like, God, how many times have you seen like women being like, no, you're supposed to be seen and not heard?
Hmm. I
That's
actually
not
dated this
anymore.
girl briefly, and she was very, very religious. And it took me a while I think I stopped dating her before I actually pieced it together. And it drove me crazy because she would like walk kind of like in my blind spot. So like to talk to her, I'd have to like turn behind me. And I'm like, can you pick up the pace? I'm like, you're such a slow walker. You're such a slow. And then I like later on, I realized that she felt that the woman should walk behind the man. And I'm like, that's insane. Don't, it just like that stuff. I don't.
Yeah. And it's I think that like every time when I have this conversation, I bring up also, I think that it's like about gender, it's about
Hmm.
sexuality, it's about race. I think it's always, we can circle back those three things. I feel like in recent history we have done a great job of talking about it, but I think that it's what gets commodified the most too. Like even in entertainment, like if you're like, how many times probably were artists gay that we didn't know about, that weren't
Oh,
allowed to
sure.
be, it
I'm
wasn't
sure there
marketable.
still are, you know?
And especially I think it's a lot more challenging for people of color than for like anybody else.
Hmm.
Like I'm an immigrant, and I think that my proximity to whiteness already offers me so much more of an edge and like an ease going through. I don't have to deal with problems, and if simply that if my skin was darker.
Right.
And it's because that idea of otherness, it always comes down to like self and other. Like what does it mean to be me, and what does it mean to be like me, and what does it mean to be other and other than me?
Hmm.
It always come down to that. I think that when we talk about power, when we're talking about um, story, it always comes down to that one thing. And at the end of the day, I personally think that all horror stories, all monsters, are about self and other. Every single like story we can boil it down is it comes to that.
Awesome. That's, I mean, that's, you're fun to talk to and you're so deep.
Thank you.
um, where can people go to get the EP?
They can go everywhere. If you're
Yeah.
on Spotify, it's on Spotify. If you're on Apple Music, it's on Apple Music. If you're on Audio Mac, it's on Audio Mac. And it's on YouTube. And I personally would recommend YouTube because there you can also watch my short movie. It's just
Yep.
10 minutes.
I actually watched it this morning because I'm like, oh shit, I should watch that before I interview her. Um,
That's a good
yeah,
idea.
yeah, and it's, life is busy, but I watched it. It was a lot of fun, and it starts. At first, I was like, oh, is it all animation? But it's not. It's really it's a very cool, different feeling thing. I liked it. So
Thank you. I had
yeah,
a lot of fun making it. I mean, we did barely get to talk about it,
yeah,
but it was a lot of fun to do. And I think I tried a lot of new things. Like I said, I'm kind of like, I've just now taken over control of my career. So it was I knew for the longest time I wanted to do a concept project, and this was kind of like my first birthing it into the world. But now that I've definitely decided I'm not quitting music, and I'm still just going to stick through it until the day I die, I think I'm going to do some other stuff that's very much in that vein.
oh, very cool. I can't wait to see like what happens next. So, and since you're not too far away, I'm gonna offer an invitation to you, and a little plug for myself on September 21st here in Plymouth at Mayflower Brewing. We're having our second annual horror movie convention. Uh, yeah, and we're gonna have
Absolutely.
John Kasser, who was the voice of the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt. He's gonna be there, and we're gonna have live podcasts and the Ghostbusters car and a Resident Evil police cruiser, food trucks, and Tim Curry's screen worn Pennywise costume will be there.
Oh wow. Wait, that's
Yeah,
really exciting. That's
yeah.
awesome.
So you're not too far away. So if you're free on the 21st, come on down. Just let me know in advance, and I'll put you on the list.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
And
listeners,
also,
oh,
while we're
sorry.
also plugging
Oh,
stuff
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for
It's about you.
friends. No, I mean, this got nothing to do with me,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
If we're plugging stuff, my favorite bad movie and is one that you should check. It's for free. It's on Tubi. It's called Rubber. I am giving Rubber a plug. I think everybody should watch it.
Okay.
It's about a killer tire. That's all I'm going to
A
say.
killer tire. Oh, that this sounds like it's my kind of movie.
Let me
Uh,
know what.
I watched one on I think it's on Amazon or was on Amazon Prime. It was a while ago. I think it's called Llama Apocalypse. Llama some sort
What?
of like it's Alpaca Apocalypse. It's something like
Alpaca
that.
Apocalypse.
And it turns out it's like a couple of college students that made this movie, and it's about these aliens that come down and pose as alpacas, and it's so perfectly bad, but done tongue in cheek at the same time. Like there's a character like halfway through the movie, I'm like, is he changing his shirt every scene? Every single scene, he's wearing a different t-shirt.
Oh my God.
To the point where you're like, oh, this is clearly intentional. And it's just dumb fun. Llamas with laser beams coming out of their eyes, and like, oh, it's so.
I can't wait. That
All
sounds
right,
like it's
you
my
watch that. I'll watch Rubber.
great.
Okay.
And then reconvene at the horror convention and we'll compare notes.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like fun. Cool. All right. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we got so stuck on horror movies, but I'm not.
I was about to say I'm not. I love that. We
Yeah.
keep going on and on and on and on.
Yeah. I weirdly I felt it like it tied everything together. So that's awesome.
Great.
And listeners, go check out Frankie the EP or watch the short film on YouTube. And we'll catch you guys again next Monday. And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.